Assalamualaikum and good evening. Today I would like to present about article review. The topic is occupational noise exposure and noise-induced hearing loss (NIHL) in Malaysia. Before we start, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Muhammad bin Kamaruddin and my friend is Muhammad Qayyum and also Nur Chelsina Amiza. Table of content. Number 1 is introductions. Number 2, summary of each article. Number 3, comparative analysis. Number 4, synthesis and reflection. Number 5, conclusion. The last one is reference. Now we go through one by one. Introductions. The research theme unifying the provided studies is urgent and widespread issue of occupational noise exposure and subsequent noise-induced hearing loss, primarily focusing on industrial and service sector within Malaysia. NIHL has emerged globally as the biggest cause of occupational disease and is among the common work-related illness in Malaysia. The significance of the research team is emphasized by the substantial health risks, as continuous exposure to high-intensity noise can lead to permanent damage to the auditory system, resulting in hearing impairment, tinnitus, difficulty understanding speech, and associated health issues like stress and reduced productivity. In Malaysia, the problem is particularly acute. The manufacturing industry is known for noise environment, and over 90% of reported occupational disease in this sector are related to hearing loss. In Sabah, specifically, almost 90% of reported occupational disease are due to hearing loss. Consequently, studies investigating exposure, prevalence, associated factor, management practice, and risk assessment model are critical for safeguarding worker health and productivity.
These 5 articles collectively address occupational noise exposure and noise-induced hearing loss among different worker groups in Malaysia. Together, they highlight that NIHL continues to be one of the most common occupational health problems in the country, affecting both emergency services and industrial sector. Article 1 examines noise exposure among Malaysian firefighters during emergency response activity. The study found that siren and rescue equipment often exceed safe noise limit, with truck siren reaching over 104 decibel. Although the measured noise dose for a 12-hour shift was relatively low, the intensity of individual noise sources showed that firefighters remain at significant risk. The study developed a noise exposure index and proposed control strategies at the vehicle, station, and equipment level. Article 2 focuses on grass-cutting workers, a group frequently exposed to loud machinery without consistent hearing protection. Noise monitoring shows average exposure of 88 awake decibel, with more than 83% of workers exceeding the 85 decibel action level. Audiometric testing revealed early signs of hearing impairment in several workers. The study concludes that grass-cutting workers face substantial NIHL risks and require protective intervention. Article 3 looks at noise management practices within Malaysia's manufacturing industry, which account for the majority of reported occupational hearing loss cases. Through expert interview, the study found that noise management is still at a basic level, with compliance driven more by the need to avoid penalties than by genuine safety culture. Barriers include low awareness, resistance to change, cost concerns, and weak enforcement. The study recommends an integrated noise management model that strengthens organizational and regulatory support. Article 4 introduced a new occupational hearing loss risk assessment model known as OHLRA. Using data from steel factory workers, the model integrates personal factor, noise exposure level, and hearing protection behaviors. The model successfully explained 74% of hearing loss variation and identified occupational noise, age, and work experience as major contributors. It categorized workers into 4 risk levels and provides a comprehensive tool for predicting NIHL. Article 5 investigates NIHL among palm oil mill workers in Sabah. The study found extremely high prevalence with 75% of workers showing hearing loss. Average noise exposure was about 96 awake decibel, well above the permitted limit. Significant factors included age, smoking, long years of service, and working near noisy machinery. The authors recommend annual hearing tests, engineering control, job rotation, and smoking cessation. In conclusion, across all 5 articles, the evidence is clear. Occupational noise exposure remains a serious and widespread issue in Malaysia. High noise level combined with limited awareness and inconsistent protection practices continue to place workers at risk of irreversible hearing loss. Strengthening noise management system, improving worker education, enforcing regulation, and adopting comprehensive risk assessment tools are critical steps to reducing NIHL and protecting workers' long-term health. The unheard danger, a snapshot of occupational noise exposure. Infographic highlight the key dangers of occupational noise exposure in Malaysia. First, many workers experience extremely loud noise. Some peak levels, such as fire truck sirens, exceed 100 decibel, while average daily exposure often reach 85 decibel. The threshold for permanent hearing damage, the impact is already visible. In some industries like palm oil mill, up to 74% of workers show signs of hearing loss, demonstrating that NIHL is not just a risk, it is occurring right now. The infographic also showed that noise exposure itself is the number one cause of hearing loss, far outweighing factors like age or work experience. However, a major weakness is poor regulatory compliance. Many workplaces follow only the minimum requirements with limited use of hearing protection and insufficient investment in noise control. Overall, the message is clear. Occupational noise in Malaysia remains a serious hazard, and stronger enforcement, awareness, and preventive measures are needed to protect worker hearing. The chart demonstrates common tools operate far into the hazardous zone. Exposure above 85 awake decibel require protective action. Exposure above 90 awake decibel is illegal without adequate control.
comparative analysis. Similarities across study. A dominant similarity across all field study, A1, A2, A5 is the documentation of widespread noise exposure exceeding regulatory limit in diverse Malaysian occupational environment. Firefighting, grass cutter, and palm oil worker all operate equipment or work in environment where noise level routinely exceed the Malaysian action level of 85 dBA decibels and often exceed the permissible limit of 19 dBA. Furthermore, all studies concerned with intervention or recommendations A1, A3, A5 coverage on the point that engineering control, which is reducing noise at the source, is the most critical or best method for managing noise despite being frequently overlooked or resisted. Regarding associate factor, the influence of age and duration of exposure is consistently highlighted as significant. Older age and longer duration of employment or work experience were statistically significant factor for hearing loss in palm oil worker, such as A5, and were recognized as high impact variable in the OHLRA model, which is A4. Additionally, smoking was identified as a significant risk factor in both the palm oil industry study and the novel risk assessment index development. Okay, now we focus on differences between studies. The studies differ significantly in their methodological approach and scope. First one is sector and focus. The sector investigate a highly varied emergency service as a A1, small and medium enterprise or manual labor as a A2, large manufacturing A5, cross-industry management overview A3, and model development A4. For the measurement type, A1, A2, and A5 are traditionally field measurement of exposure and or prevalence. A4 is a methodological study focused on validating a complex multivariate risk prediction model OHLRA using structural equations modeling SEM. A3 is a qualitative study focused on behavioral, organizational, and policy awareness barrier rather than physical noise measurement. Hearing protection compliance. While low usage of hearing protection device is generally acknowledged, uniquely quantify the importance of HDP element such as use NRR awareness, determining that they collectively account for 45.2% of hearing loss cases, highlighting the quantitative impact of effective PPE use. A clear trend is the shift from slowly documenting high noise level to developing holistic framework for intervention and predictions. This is evidenced by the first one is multifactorial risk assessment. A4 moves beyond simple exposure, time or level to validate the comprehensive index OHLRA that integrate personal factor, exposure, and PPE effectiveness, providing a robust, quantified tool for risk predictions. Number 2, focus on organization and cultural barriers. A3 represent a critical trend by identifying that failure in noise management is often due to awareness gaps, insufficient organizational support, such as cost resistance and involuntary compliance, rather than just a lack of technical solutions. This led to the development of the integrated occupational noise management model. Now we look at a key barrier. A recurring gap is the pervasive low awareness among both workers and employers regarding long-term noise risk, leading to a diminished perception of risk and ineffective mitigation strategies. Another key gap is the resistance to engineering control due to high costs. Furthermore, suggests that the complex interplay of factors like vibration exposure alongside noise need further specific investigation in workers like grass cutter. For the emerging issue, the high correlation between smoking and hearing loss suggests that health intervention programs such as smoking cessations are an emerging ancillary component of NIHL prevention in occupational setting. To propose integrated occupational noise management model, which demand combined governmental, organization, and employee action, is a significant emerging strategy for addressing compliance issues comprehensively.
Now moving on to the synthesis and reflection of the 5 studies. After reviewing all the research, one key message becomes very clear. Malaysia's struggle to control occupational noise-induced hearing loss is not because we lack knowledge. Instead, the real issue is poor implementation and low prioritization. Across different industries, whether firefighters, grass cutters, or palm oil mill workers, all studies consistently shows that noise levels are clearly hazardous. We also have advanced tools such as the Occupational Hearing Loss Risk Assessment Model or OHLRA, which can accurately predict and quantify risk. So scientifically, we already know what causes NIHL and how to measure it. However, the problem starts when we look at the real working environment. The qualitative findings from the manufacturing sector shows that noise management is often placed at the bottom of the priority list. Many employees see noise as an invisible hazard, something that doesn't feel dangerous until it's too late. On the management side, companies often avoid proper engineering controls because they involve high costs. So instead of controlling noise at the source, which is repeatedly identified as the best method, they choose to the bare minimum, usually by giving workers cheap PPE. But even that becomes ineffective because workers commonly refuse to use PPE due to discomfort or inconvenience. This explains why some industries like palm oil mills still report extremely high NIHL rates. For example, 75%. So what does this mean for Malaysia? It means that our challenge is no longer about identifying the best noise control method. We already know the solutions. The real challenge is overcoming organizational habit, worker behavior, and economic pressure that stop these solutions from being fully implemented. To address this, a holistic approach is needed. The integrated occupational noise management model highlights 3 key pillars: organizational support. Companies must invest financially and make noise control a real priority. Employee involvement. Workers must be aware, responsible, and compliant. Governmental support. Stronger enforcement and incentives to push industry towards the proper control measures. In summary, Malaysia doesn't have a knowledge problem. We have an implementation problem. Noise hazards are known. Solutions are known, but unless the cultural, behavioral, and economic barriers are addressed, occupational NIHL will continue to persist. Based on this slide, it shows you what is OHLRA assessment. Finally, I will conclude by summarizing the key takeaways from the 5 studies and discussing their implication for practice and future research. From this review, we can clearly see that occupational noise-induced hearing loss in Malaysia is both severe and multifaceted. First, hazardous noise exposure is not limited to one industry. It is widespread across emergency services, manual labor such as grass cutting and large-scale manufacturing like palm oil processing. This shows that NIHL is a national issue affecting multiple sectors. Second, the studies agree that noise exposure itself is the main cause of the hearing loss. This highlights a very important message. If we want to reduce NIHL, we must start by controlling the noise at its source. Third, NIHL is not caused by noise alone. It's a cumulative disease. Personal factors such as age, smoking, and length of service significantly increase the risk. This means that some workers are more vulnerable than others, and intervention needs to consider these individual characteristics. Fourth, and perhaps most important, there is a major implementation gap. Even though we know the risk and we know the solution, noise management is still weak. Many workers lack awareness. Employees resist the cost of engineering control. MPP is often not worn properly or consistently. This gap between knowledge and action is the critical challenge Malaysia continues to face. Implication for practice. So what can be done in practice? First, industry needs to prioritize engineering control. Relying on PP alone is not enough, especially when workers find it uncomfortable. Company must be encouraged and sometimes pushed to invest in controlling noise at the source. Second, organization and government agencies should work together to implement the integrated occupational noise management model. This model emphasizes strong enforcement, financial commitment from employees, and meaningful employee involvement supported by proper training and education. Third, occupational health programs should be more holistic since factors like smoking increase NIHL risk. Combining smoking cessation support with hearing conservation program can significantly improve outcome, especially among high-risk workers. Implication for future research. For future research, 3 areas stand out. First, the OHLRA risk index show great potential, but it needs further testing in more industry validating. This tool widely will help standardize risk prediction for NIHL across Malaysia. Second, more qualitative research is needed to understand behavioral barriers such as why workers refuse hearing to invest in engineering control. Solving this human and organizational issue is essential for real progress. Finally, future studies should explore how noise interact with other hazards like vibration. Many workers are exposed to multiple risks at the same time, and understanding this combined effect is crucial for developing more comprehensive protection strategies. In summary, the findings are clear. Malaysia knows the challenge now is to strengthen implementation, invest in long-term controls, and understand the human factor behind non-compliance. Only then can we effectively reduce the burden of occupational NIHL. Next is the reference 5 article that we refer to do this presentation. This is the 5 article we do as a reference for our presentation. That's all from us. Thank you.